Brandon Arnold joins us now. He is the Executive Vice President for the National Taxpayers Union. Mr. Arnold, take us inside those numbers we're seeing. Inflation is rising. Why?
Yeah, inflation is getting pushed up, and the number one reason, of course, is the president's tariffs. The tariffs increase the price of imports. That drives up prices across the board, some products more than others. We're seeing inflation display itself more acutely in things like coffee, where we simply cannot produce it much domestically, and we have very high tariffs on certain countries like Brazil, where we customarily import a lot of coffee beans. So that is the number one reason why we're seeing inflation pushing up those prices there, and not to the extent that we had in 2022, but still high enough to impact a lot of consumers right now.
The president rolled out the first rounds of tariffs. Economists said that this was going to be the month that we started to see the bottom fall out of the U.S. economy. They were predicting doom and gloom. That obviously is not happening. Is the president right when it comes to tariffs?
I think there are some troubling signs ahead. I would not be spiking the football right now if I were the president, because I do think we are going to see higher inflation going forward if the Supreme Court upholds the president's tariffs, and they're going to be making that ruling, or at least hearing the case, next month. So if those tariffs stay in place, a lot of companies front-loaded purchases. They brought in a lot of imports before the tariffs took place. That inventory has helped keep supply low. And also they've shifted costs. They've reduced labor costs by hiring fewer workers. And that's materializing itself in the jobs numbers, which have been very, very tepid and weak. But that can only last for so long. And 70% of businesses right now, according to a recent KPMG survey, say they're going to increase prices, some very significantly, over the next 6 months. So I would hold on. If these tariffs stay in place, prices, I do believe, are going to increase more significantly going forward.
All eyes now will be on the Fed. What does the Fed do as inflation, as you indicated, is rising and the unemployment numbers don't look good? Could that signal another rate cut? They've already said there probably would be one, but based on the numbers we're seeing on Wall Street today, could it be larger than expected?
It might be. I think that's certainly the reason why Wall Street is reacting the way it did to these inflation numbers. While they are not positive numbers, they certainly should be taken with some degree of concern. The fact that they're not much higher than expected, most economists were saying they'd be a percentage point or two higher, 3.1, 3.2%, to come in at 3%, I think does give Wall Street the feeling that we will get a larger than expected rate cut. That is certainly fueling the optimism that we see on Wall Street, with them pushing markets to new highs today. But we'll see whether that optimism is warranted. The Fed has been very unpredictable, and I do think that Chairman Powell in particular is very concerned about inflation and digging deeply into some of these numbers.
Which number is he more concerned about? Is he more concerned about inflation, or is he more concerned about the unemployment numbers?
Yeah, that's a great question, because, of course, the Fed has that dual mandate, which often runs counter to one another, to increase employment at the same time that they're trying to cut inflation to the target rate of about 2%. And these currently are certainly at odds with one another. So cutting the rate will certainly increase economic activity. That should boost employment. But I do think that Powell right now is more focused on inflation. I think we were burned so badly as a country in 2022 when we saw inflation reach levels up to 9%. That really hurt the economy badly. I think it hurt the credibility of the Fed pretty badly as well. So I think that will be a bigger factor going forward. If there is concern deep in these numbers about inflation getting worse, then that could signal a smaller than expected rate cut.
Mr. Arnold, if you will, speak to the doom and gloom that we're hearing from some economists, because they're looking at the numbers. I looked at the numbers just a moment ago. The Dow at 47,000 and some change, record territory, and it has been throughout the last week. But some people are saying we're on a bubble. They're looking at things like car notes that are now going into default. They're looking at auto loans now that are now bigger than they should be because the price of a car is bigger than it should be. Are we looking at another bubble?
I think that's quite possible, and a lot of people are certainly looking at AI right now. So much investment right now because of the enthusiasm around AI. Is that a bubble that's started to form, and will that bubble soon pop? I don't have all the answers here, but I share some of those concerns that we're hearing from the doom and gloom economists. Listen, we're seeing unemployment claims increase. We're seeing a very weak job market. We're seeing a hit to consumer confidence. And in an economy where consumer spending makes up about 2/3 of our overall economy, we're starting to see some signs that the consumers are maxed out, with credit card bills totaling $1.2 trillion and consumer confidence beginning to crater. If we do start to see that trend continue, too early to freak out about it, but if that trend does continue, then we could be heading toward a recession. I think about half of economists, if you survey them right now, would say that we're probably heading toward a recession. So the economy could go either way. We're kind of on that knife's edge right now, and I don't begrudge those economies that are taking more of a doom and gloom approach to things.
Wow. So we're heading into the Christmas shopping season. My wife is thinking about something expensive. Is now the time to tell her, maybe not this year, how about next year?
Perhaps. Hopefully your finances are quite strong. I know there's a lot of consumers right now that are hedging their bets in the retail market. I'm sure Amazon, Target, a lot of those big retailers that have these early sales right now heading into the holiday seasons did quite well because consumer confidence is starting to show those signs of weaknesses, as I mentioned earlier. So I think people are making those big purchases a little bit earlier. That's one of the reasons why consumer numbers have continued to be strong, even though consumers see dark clouds on the horizon and a lot of concerns about what the economy will look like going forward, with most of them expecting inflation to worsen, not improve, as we head into the holiday season.
Final question before I let you go. President Trump campaigning on lowering inflation. Does the number of the CPI, the numbers that we're seeing on Wall Street, prove that the market may have a mind of its own?
Yeah, the numbers on Wall Street are pretty surprising, I would say. I think the numbers that matter most politically right now are consumers' impression of where things are. We're seeing more than 3/4 of consumers saying they're spending more on a monthly basis on everyday expenses. If that number continues at the rate that it's at right now, I think that is going to be political problems for the president. You look back to Biden, it wasn't just the high inflation that really hurt his presidency. It was the high inflation plus the continued drumbeat of news we got from the White House saying there is no inflation, everything is fine, the economy is great. If President Trump follows that same pattern, I think he's going to take a pretty significant hit, certainly from more of the Democratic and independent-minded voters, but increasingly from his base, who can simply not afford to continue to take on higher prices and higher monthly costs at a time when so many of us are maxing out credit cards and, as you mentioned earlier, starting to default on consumer loans like auto loans and even mortgages.
I got to ask you in 30 seconds that I have left, a pet peeve. Do companies think that consumers aren't really that smart? And I'm talking about shrinkflation. You may be paying the same amount that you paid for instance, an ice cream bar. I'll just use that as an example because I had one last night. But the bar that was this big at one time is now this big. Do they think we're not that smart to figure out that we're getting ripped off?
Well, it's a highly competitive marketplace there. So I think they're hedging their bets and they're deciding that providing a similar product that's slightly smaller than before will appease consumers more than jacking up the price and keeping everything else as it is. Whether that's pulling the wool over the consumer's eyes or not is a matter of perspective, but they are betting that that is how consumers would prefer to see them handle these higher input costs that they're facing. And tariffs are part of that, but there's certainly other factors driving up prices for manufacturers in this country right now.
Just for the record, I did not name the bar, but we see you. Brandon Arnold is the Executive Vice President of the National Taxpayers Union. Mr. Arnold, thanks for being with us.
Thank you very much, Del.